disabled applicants will not need to wait for 30 years for a place. Dr. Kennedy Wong. Mr. President, Mr. Paul Chan, the Financial Secretary, delivered this year's budget. In light of the economic situation and the actual circumstances, the Financial Secretary has come up with a basket of measures in the short, medium, and long term so that the members of the public who just emerged from the epidemic can have the burden lifted off the shoulders for them to recuperate. I'm concerned about the digital economy. In this budget, I see some of my suggestions being incorporated. For example, tax breaks are provided for telecommunications operators to make capital investments. Together with friends in my circle, we support this budget, but with rapid changes in the external environment, the budget hasn't said much about bolstering our status as an international trade center in light of the external situation. We do not have natural resources. We rely on trade and export, but according to last year's statistics, the export volume dropped by 4.1% and 20.3% respectively, the largest drop. And in the first quarter of this year, the export volume further shrank by 30% comparing to previous quarters. It has, the decline has somewhat tapered, but we're not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And our position as an international financial center will be at stake if we don't do something about it. I think we should all know more about digital economy, and we should also acknowledge the importance of e-commerce. The mainland has the largest fast-moving consumer goods market. We should leverage on this advantage and integrate ourselves into the mainland market and serve the country's needs. We can also take this opportunity to upgrade and transform our mode of commerce to an online-offline mode. And having conducted in-depth research, we found that because of various reasons, as far as e-commerce in Hong Kong is concerned, we are not. We are lagging behind, and we should make reference to the success of e-commerce in the mainland. The Financial Secretary should look squarely at this issue and provide sufficient support resource-wise. First, the government should draw up a comprehensive policy to support the development of e-commerce to bolster our status as an international commercial center. A high-level cross-bureau task force should be set up, chaired by the Financial Secretary. This high-level committee should conduct comprehensive research planning in order to draw up policies to tackle the problems facing us. Especially for G2G, collaboration should be fostered. For example, on customs clearance and other matters relating to, say, financial regulators, there should be more communication and collaboration to resolve problems surrounding the development of e-commerce. For example, we should strive for the expansion of coverage of the list of items eligible for e-commerce so that more local IP products can enter the mainland market and that we can create synergy. Second, the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau governments should align their rules and regulations so that common standards can be drawn up for GBA products and for Hong Kong products to have access to the mainland market. Third, major mainland enterprises in Hong Kong should act as the liaison. Leveraging on the advantage, we can create a mechanism under which we can form a large e-commerce platform allowing the flow of goods and settlement to take place across the boundary. This can also allow young entrepreneurs to start their businesses at lower costs. An e-commerce subgroup should be set up under the Digital Economy Development Committee so as to take forward the development of e-commerce and online platforms to help the industries upgrade and transform. Regular funding should be provided. For example, there should be a facilitation measure for the development of e-commerce, and a subsidy should be provided to SMEs for them to upgrade and transform their business and adopt e-commerce as a solution. Strategies should also be drawn up to place ourselves as the regional IP trading hub. Well, for example, we have introduced the original patent grant system, and according to the budget, more resources will be put in to drive the development of OPG in Hong Kong, so as to establish ourselves as an international R&T center. But as a the midterm target by 2025, the establishment for OPG will only be increased to 40, and then by 2030 to 100. But this is not enough for Hong Kong to become a regional IP trading hub in the long term. According to mainland statistics, there are over 4 million effective patents developed in the mainland, and as far as I know, the patent examiners in the mainland come in tens of thousands. In Hong Kong, we have a very good system to protect IPs, and we also have advantage in professional services. So we need to groom our own talents and attract talents so that we have the condition to establish ourselves as a regional IP trading hub. We can also help mainland enterprises go global and attract foreign enterprises to tap the GBA market. There is so much to do. More patent examiners should be recruited to further develop the original patent grant system. We should also further develop this system under the Madrid Protocol so as to expand the coverage to original patent grant as well. We should also look into other facilitation measures to protect IPs across the boundary so that this international IP convention can take effect in Hong Kong. And we can provide professional services relating to the trading of IPs, so on and so forth. I support the Appropriation Bill 2023-24.
Mr. Kenneth Lau. President, the budget this year is about leaping forward steadily to bolster prosperity under one new vision. This is the first budget after COVID is over and we are starting the recovery. 3 years of COVID hit our economy hard. We saw a drop in the revenue, more than $200 billion in deficit over the years. The government adopted an expansionary fiscal policy. Measures were rolled out to shore up the economy and support people. This also led to a sharp drop in our fiscal reserves. Compared to the 2019 level, over just 4 years, we spent more than $350 billion of our reserves. That's a more than 30% drop. It's a difficult time. There's a deficit in the budget. It's a moderate to liberal budget. There are measures to support people. I believe this budget has balanced the needs of different sectors of the community and also will shore up the economic recovery and help our city with high quality development. As we go from stability to prosperity, this budget will help us. Now, an IMF study shows that in the post-COVID times, we need a recovery from the COVID times. We also need to explore new sources of revenue and save for rainy days. First, on helping people put COVID behind, the Financial Secretary has taken on board the views of the Heung Yee-kok and other members. That means the $5,000 consumption vouchers. This provides strong impetus for our economic recovery. For some taxes and rates, there are also concessions. There's also a proposal to raise the child allowance to $130,000. I understand the fiscal constraints there. We have limited resources, so we have to act accordingly. That's why the sweeteners this year are scaled down. Let's hope that in the future, when we are in a better position, and then we can have more measures to ease people's burden. Now we need to enhance our image after COVID times to provide impetus for growth. This is a key task for the government. The budget proposes a range of measures to attract businesses and talent. First, the capital investment entrance scheme, also the top talent pass scheme. There are also visa schemes for the Greater Bay Area specifically. I hope the government can announce the details soon and implement them. Details we need are the threshold, the eligibility conditions, etc. On attracting businesses, the government should take bolder steps in bringing in foreign firms. First, a full review of our tax system, review and provide tax concessions for specific industries. We also urge the government to join the RCEP Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, and we should also work with other economies in coming to free trade agreement to avoid double taxation. President, the Northern Metropolis will be the new growth engine of our city's future. The metropolis will also help with the development of innovation technology so that we can finance in the south and innovation technology or IT in the north. This is also a key platform for us to integrate into national development. The government should crack on with the new development area projects. This includes Kutong North, Fanling North, Hongshui-Kiu, Hachun, and also Yunnan South. And also the government should take this infrastructure-led approach in planning ahead, work on the infrastructure, drive the development, so that we don't have a situation where people move into an area and simply lack the transport. Now, for the Lok Ma Chau Loop, there's a Hong Kong Shenzhen Innovation and Technology Park. There will be 3 buildings, and then there's also a land formation for the Sentin Technopole. These projects take time, and they need to be delivered on time. And there will be land. With that land, we can bring INT firms to come to Hong Kong and help us achieve new growth. Now, housing is another key area. There's a long-standing housing shortage, and people are stuck with smaller and smaller flats. In 2021, the average living area, the median, is 16 square meters. For subdivided units, that's 6.6 square meters. The living space is far smaller than in Seoul and Singapore, where they have 30 to 35 square meters. And that has to do with the land shortage. The budget says that land has been identified for 360,000 public housing units. But then the land for housing will come out unevenly over the years. And it also takes time to create land. So in the short term, the developable land will see a shortage. 12 sites will be sold for housing, and then with the MTLC's project and ULA's project altogether, we will have roughly 20,000 private flats. That's a record high in 5 years. For industrial sites, 7 will be sold. In total, they will provide 170 to 200,000 square meters in gross floor area. There was a 15.6 drop in home prices. The trade volume dropped by roughly 40%. The office vacancy rate is at 12.1%. Developers are more cautious in buying land. We have 3 failed land sales. This includes a site in Stanley, a government land for upmarket, and there is also a site in Kwun Tong and also the Siu Ho Wan depot in Lantau Island. The government should closely watch the market situation and be pragmatic by, for example, breaking down the sites into smaller plots and also provide incentives for developers. On the home market, the harsh measures should be dropped when needed. The government pledged not to sell land cheap. But given the fiscal pressure, there's a need to boost revenue. When needed, the government needs to be pragmatic and have regard to the market conditions by adjusting the land sale prices. There's a need to maintain stable land supply, and this means there should not be a slowdown in the supply of land just because of a market slowdown. President, in the northern metropolis, there will be infrastructure projects. There will also be the artificial islands in Kaoyuchao. The government should boost revenue. Issuing bonds is one option. Other options should be explored. I'm grateful to the Financial Secretary for being responsive and taken on board our proposal to collect $2.4 billion over 5 years from the Hong Kong Jockey Club as the special betting duty. In total, that will bring $12 billion in extra revenue. The Hong Kong Jockey Club sits on top of huge reserves. They have the duty and they also have the means to ride out the tough times together with the people and contribute more money to the public coffers. With greater power comes greater responsibility. That's why the Heung Yee Kok proposed a higher football betting duty from 50% to 70% of the betting volume. This will bring billions of revenue for the coffers. The government can also explore options with the sports betting options. The proceeds can be spent on supporting local sports events such as snooker, swimming, golf tournament, and also increase the subsidies for athletes training. This can also promote our sports industry. President, the basic law says that our budget should keep the expenditure within the limits of revenue. We should balance the books and avoid deficits. In 2022 and 2023, the deficit is nearly $140 billion, the second highest on record. Now we expect $54 billion in deficit or so. Now we have roughly $817 billion in reserves, and then that's a low level. That's roughly 12 months of government expenditure. There is a global economic downturn and a high interest rate in the U.S. There are uncertainties for our economy. Now we have more than $100 billion in deficit and a drop in our reserves. So the government should be cautious and create stronger impetus for growth. At the same time, the government should exercise prudence, spend where needed, and tighten the purse strings and maintain the robustness of our financial system. I so submit and I support the Appropriation Bill. Mr. Rock Chen. President, I speak in support of the Appropriation Bill 2023. The budget this year is about shoring up our economic recovery, supporting our high-quality development for the economy. Our fiscal position is facing challenges. The relief measures are scaled back. Despite that, the government cares about people's livelihood. The Financial Secretary has made adjustments to the measures and made good use with the resources to speed up our economic recovery so that we can pick up momentum again. That way, we can proceed with recovery full steam ahead and actively align with our national development and strengthen our edge in finance and also plan ahead for our economy. I'm pleased to see that DAB suggestions have been taken on board in the budget. I will discuss 6 areas and share my thoughts on them. First, the recovery. We need to ensure full speed recovery. recovery full steam ahead is the overarching priority here. Some money will go into holding mega events, including a global publicity campaign and also the forums. There will also be publicity on Hong Kong as a platform for the Belt and Road Initiative. That way, we can have a comprehensive approach in generating new momentum for Hong Kong. The budget also mentions support for small and medium enterprises. There will be extensions and enhancements to the SME financing guarantee schemes. This will help firms seize the business opportunities after COVID. Second, actively integrating into national development. We've been expanding and enhancing our mutual market access with the mainland market. We're also enhancing the offshore RMB businesses. We're also providing more RMB denominated product. The budget also mentions government green bonds and infrastructure bonds. There will also be steps to promote green finance certification, so that we can have a diverse range of financial products. People also get investment options with a stable return. Now, the budget mentions measures to enhance the arrangements for family offices. There are Middle East sovereign funds. There are also ultra-high net worth individuals. We can serve as a platform for them. That's how we can give full play to our role as a super connector with the backing of our country and global connectivity. Now, we also have measures on companies redomiciling. We want to attract international firms to come to Hong Kong. This way will help us enhance our status as a place for asset management. Third, planning for the economy. The budget mentions several measures on driving Hong Kong's high-quality development and also strengthening Hong Kong's role as the 8 centers under the 14th five-year plan. For example, on driving innovation and technology, on digital economy, Web3, and also international green technology and financial center. There's discussion on these areas in the budget. Now, there will be an AI supercomputing center under the budget. There will also be a microelectronics research and development center. There will also be a task force on virtual assets. All these measures help foster our development as a smart city, digital economy, Web3, and cryptocurrency. Fourth, enhancing our role as an aviation hub. The budget meets the expectation of country's plans to turn us into an aviation hub. We will have a new business park in the airport so that we can have passenger traffic, logistics, and also business travel. In the future, our airport will go from a conventional airport to an integrated airport where we can have various kinds of economic activities at that hub. Now, the budget also mentions having an air logistics park in Zhuhai. We have limited land at the Hong Kong airport. Working with Zhuhai will mean we can leverage the mainland's industry chains. And then for our aviation industry, we can have a comprehensive development. Now, with the Sky Pier terminal and also the 3 runway system, the government should make good use of the capacity of our airport so that we can have more routes, more flights, and that's how we can be truly connected to the rest of the world. With expanding the airport's capacity, we also need more manpower. The budget mentions an internship scheme where there will be more places for internship training for aviation talent. I support this move, but apart from training, we should also consider importing manpower. That way, we can ensure we have enough workers and talent for our aviation industry, and that can ensure the sustainability and competitiveness of the aviation industry. Fifth, we should fill the gap in the manpower for the construction industry. We have a serious manpower crunch, and there are succession issues, and we have an aging workforce. We have 600,000 registered construction workers, average age 47 years old. The budget mentions collaboration with tertiary institutions to enhance the ladder for those pursuing the studies. There will be part-time programs and on-job training subsidies. I support this. The government is determined to boost housing supply. There will be infrastructure projects that will start. Apart the ones I have mentioned, the government should consider importing manpower quickly. We should step up local training. These measures go hand in hand. 6. Vocational and Professional Education and Training, or VPET. The Vocational Training Council will provide programs so that students get earlier access to VPET. This will help young people of different aspirations. We will give them diverse options in their studies and training. The government should also enhance the VPET qualification framework and promote the VPET. We should consider the future needs of our labor market and encourage tertiary institutions to offer a variety of programs so that students of different interests, aspirations, and competences can find what they need, and then we can provide the human resources our community needs. All in all, the budget this year is in line with its vision of leaping forward steadily and bolstering prosperity under our new vision. And this will be a positive impact on our economy. As we integrate into our national development, we can take Hong Kong to a higher level of high-quality development. President, I support the Appropriation Bill 2023.
Mr. Stanley Lee. Thank you, President. I'm very concerned about plannings relating to welfare and the allocation of funding. Well, for a number of years, education takes up the most expenditure. However, starting from 2021, for social welfare, the expenditure has risen to $129 billion. On elderly care, there has been an increase in 2020 and 21 for elderly service. It's about $120 billion. There will be an increase by 10%. What is $15 billion for the Tung Chung extension is more or less the same amount, and that is only the funding, the expenditure for 1 year for elderly services. We have been experiencing a low birth rate. Baby boomers are retiring. We have an aging population, and that is getting more serious. According to the UN, Hong Kong will enter a stage where there is ultra high age. Because of various problems, elderly services has always been in short supply. With an increasing elderly population, the demand will only increase. Back in 2017, the government announced an elderly service plan advocating for community care and aging at home. But so far, a number of major services, say for example, subvented elderly residential cases, is in short supply. People complain that the waiting time is at least 1 year. As at end of March, about 17,000 people are waiting. We now have 76,000 places with an occupation amount of 60,000, so a vacancy of about 10,000. 76,000 places and 60,000 elderly people staying in them, and 16,000 people staying. Well, actually, there are enough places for every elderly person, but there are places that are not subvented. That's why there is a long waiting time for subvented places, but there are vacancies in private homes. I don't rule out the possibility that for various reasons, say for example, price and the environment, it's not to every person's taste. But if you want to be a subvented place, you have to meet certain requirements. In recent years, places in private homes have improved. And I see that there are lots of private companies that have been providing elderly care residential services. They charge a high price for very good quality of service. Well, there is a market for subvented places and for private places. The government has not planned very carefully when it comes to allocation of resources. The purpose of the residential care voucher scheme is to enable elderly people to stay in private places so as to alleviate pressure on waiting time for subvented places, but only about 1,600 people waiting for 3,000 places. So that it's a waste of resources. A lot of people told me that the residential care voucher starting from the 1st of April will increase to $16,011. But if you have, but you are better off, you have to pay more. The SWD, the Social Welfare Department, will set the level of fees you have to pay, taking into account your asset and income. But for level 1, that is with an income of $5,000 to $7,000, you will have to pay about $1,100. That is quite a high percentage of your income. And there are only a few locations to choose from, so they have to turn to private places. Well, sometimes if they know that you have the residential home voucher, they charge you more if you stay in a private place. So if you want to make sure that resources are properly used, to have to make adjustments and consolidate current services. You have to make sure that quality is guaranteed. And the tiered scheme under the residential home voucher should be scrapped. The value of the vouchers should be enhanced. And you should put in place different ways to attract people to use the vouchers. And you also need to introduce competition in the market to drive up quality. In this way, elderly people will benefit, and you'll be able to divert people with the right means to different places. We've just been to the GBA. We looked at the residential care homes and their services and their environment. We wanted to get a better understanding of the development of the sector. We want to explore more opportunities to provide better options for elderly people. We see rapid development in the GBA. There is a maturing market for elderly services. In Hong Kong, the waiting time for residential care home is long. A lot of people passed away before they get a place. Why doesn't the government devote resources to promote elderly services in GBA? And there should be subsidy provided for use in the GBA. The healthcare voucher should enable money follow the patient approach for use in the GBA. And the government should also enhance the bought place scheme. They should identify place centers in the GBA and make them available for elderly people in Hong Kong. If you look at the SWD site, you'll find that the philosophy of elderly service is to enable elderly people to live with dignity and to provide suitable support to them so that they will be well taken care of. The government also advocates aging at home is being the backbone and supported by residential services. If that is the case, there should be allocation of funding to address problems with residential care services. In November last year, I moved a motion advocating for carer-centered policy. It was supported. Last month, I met with Mr. Sun, the secretary, to ask for following up of the policy in relation to the dedicated round-the-clock hotline, support centers for carers, life planning for carers. We have had in-depth discussion. I hope the government will implement our ideas as soon as possible. The aging population will not be reversed in the short term. We already spent $129 billion on welfare. I think the crux of the key is allocation. A lot of the funding goes to different places, and they are rather fragmented. The government should be determined to consolidate limited resources to ensure sustainable development. I suggest that carers should receive life planning and training on different skills. If there is a career pathway put in place for them, and to enable them to join the healthcare trade, this will enable sustainable development, and it will be more targeted. I speak in support of the bill. Mr. Lam Sen Keung. I speak in support of the Appropriation Bill 2023. That is the 2023 to 24 budget. This is the first budget after the epidemic. This is a very strong budget to revive Hong Kong's economy. I thank the Financial Secretary. In the budget, he has taken on board the views of the legal sector, including training manpower on green financing, on intellectual property, and to start as soon as possible study on another amendment on copyright, and to support aircraft leasing facilities in Hong Kong so that Hong Kong can become a center, and to develop maritime arbitration services, and to promote the use of an online platform for mediation. The FS also confirmed that there will be financial support to the judiciary as well as the legal aid department to support the development of the sector. The expenditure will be $810 billion compared to 2018-19, which is $576 billion. There is an increase by about 40%. I understand that the additional expenditure is to stimulate short-term economic development and for long-term development, but money is not the panacea. But without fully understanding the crux of the problem and putting in place proper plans, the money will go down the drain. We have structural problems waiting to be resolved. If we are to develop Hong Kong into an Asia-Pacific dispute resolution center, well, you may refer to the speech of Mr. Xia Baolong that the central authorities support Hong Kong's continuous adoption of the common law. Every year, expenditure has been given to the judiciary for electronic services and for high remuneration for judges. But e-services is still quite backward. You have to wait for over 100 days for summonses. The target was 50 days. For criminal cases, it's worse. You have to wait for over 300 days. For criminal cases in the High Court, in the past, there was a target waiting time. After June 2017, there was no target anymore. Starting from 2018, the judiciary said that they would review the waiting time. But they've been considering it for 6 years. Still, there is no conclusion. That's the pace of work for the judiciary. Shouldn't the government look into it? The budget said that there is 99% of the cases, lawyers will receive money under the legal aid scheme. But a lot of people told me that they've been waiting for years and still they have not been paid. If Hong Kong is to be developed into an international dispute resolution center, we have to train manpower. Without manpower, you can't do anything. The legal aid department can be a cradle for manpower training. According to an annual report in 2021, over 80% of the cases are outsourced to lawyers with at least 10 years of experience. So they take into account seniority. That is not conducive to training new blood. Hong Kong should train mainland lawyers on different expertise, and it involves many months of local and overseas training. But the financial secretary gave us $10,000 and thought that that's enough. When it comes to training manpower on maritime law, intellectual property, and green finance, the government should do more. They should talk to professional bodies, and they should provide more subsidy on manpower training. We call ourselves an international financial center. We want to get involved with family offices. I understand that in the past few months, together with Christopher Hui, they've been going to different places to tell good stories of Hong Kong. They encourage enterprises to come to Hong Kong to invest. But the financial services sector and the legal sector told me, well, that's not just, and that's also people from the accounting sector. They said that if overseas companies want to get listed here, they will advise these companies not to come, because for certain departments, even if you're eligible, you have to go through hurdles in the form of procedures. And in the end, you will lose heart, and it will dampen our reputation as an international financial center. I asked bureau secretaries and the FS to look into it. The government said that they will attract a multinational corporation to come to Hong Kong to set up headquarters. But a lot of lawyers said that our bankruptcy law cannot properly protect enterprises, and the legislation is rather backward. So they would go to Bermuda and the Virgin Islands. And in terms of corporate rescue procedure, it's been considered for over a decade. In 2021, the government said they will be introduced, but we haven't heard anything about it anymore. We talk about International Innovation and Technology Center, and using life science as an example for pharmacy and poisons ordinance and registration requirements, they are quite biased towards mainland practitioners. You will have to first get approval from US, Japan, and Europe. For Science Park, when it comes to life science, you can only work on tonics. COVID medication and vaccines will have to rely on LegCo to pass a bill on an urgent basis for use in Hong Kong, and these are not conducive to development in Hong Kong. In relation to a bill relating to medical equipment, the purpose is to streamline procedure so that there can be direct registration of equipment in Hong Kong. It saves a third-party certification. At the same time, it will protect public interest. And it will also ensure safety and maintenance of medical equipment used in beauty parlors. But it's still not finished yet. We should pave the way to facilitate INT development, not to stop them. I hope that the government will talk to legislators from the sector and work together to review current legislation so that laws can help with INT development. There are grand visions, and in some areas there is funding given. But I think the government should also be determined to conduct reform so that we can return to our former self. I support the bill. Thank you.
Mr. Tan Ka-pil, thank you, Mr. Deputy. I have with me this budget 2023-24. The FTU praises this budget as steady steps are taken to take forward development of various industries. Now, some legislators, like myself, are not familiar with industrial development, and yet we believe that some good measures have rolled out. We are expected. The mainland will become the major economy in 10 years' time, and we stay united in advancing the cause of rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. So in various aspects of social development, be it environmental protection, economic development, maintaining social harmony, lifting people out of poverty, etc., as well as preserving the traditional Chinese culture, our country has made a lot of effort. Now, I make this point because I want to ask the next important question. Are our young people aware of all these things? We have over 1,400 MNCs setting up their headquarters or offices in Hong Kong. They ask young candidates applying for the jobs in the companies what a 14th five-year plan means, what the 20th National Congress means, so on and so forth. And Hong Kong youths may not be aware of these things, and as a result, their jobs will be snatched by other mainland graduates or mainlanders who graduated overseas. So what is close to my heart is how we make sure local young people know about our country and the latest development. This is of utmost importance, and we must work in solidarity in this regard. Now, another point is I can identify three trends. There's a question whether the budget can keep up with these three trends. First, going smart. Second, I think the Greater Bay Area development is exactly heading in this direction. Our aspiration is that when it comes to when it comes to economic development and the bond between people, we should step up liaison not only with the Greater Bay Area but also with ASEAN, for example, so that we can create synergy in the region. Third point, I do hope that in the budget or in the next policy address, there will be measures to respond to these three emerging trends. The chief executive said after leading a delegation to the Greater Bay Area that he will be putting a lot of thought on tackling the bottlenecks. Mr. Ambrose Lam just now made some valid points on the efficiency of governance, the civil service structure, and other bottlenecks that pose hurdles to enhancing governance and productivity. In particular, the State Council's report has made a solemn promise on e-governance. The mainland government, the central government gives a promise at the level of a report issued by the State Council that if you want to apply for a permit, it will be issued within a certain number of days. Now, another point is on the labor issues. I have, 10 points to make. Is food for thought for the government officials. First, we need to review and reform the welfare policy formulated on the basis of jobs. Now, as many people have touched on this issue, There are people who have been on the dole for a long time. Why is it that they get stuck in the CSSA security net instead of getting a job? Are there factors that cause them to remain in the CSSA safety net? I think the electrical as well as the government should conduct a study about encouraging elderly to work. I hope the government can take the lead in this regard. For all outsourced and contract workers, the government should make voluntary MPF contributions to those above the age of 65 to encourage more to join the workforce. Third, digitization. Now, comparing to other places in the world, the SMEs and the laborers in Hong Kong don't often use technology to help enhance productivity. Now, this example is often quoted. Say for street cleansing, in other places they have devices, smart devices that can help cleaners cleanse the street, whereas in Hong Kong, manual labor is still the trend. Fourth, we should attach importance to labor we should attach importance to safety. And then one-way permit, that's the fourth point. We have 150 quotas available every day. And in recent years, we all know that these quotas are not used up. In fact, you can use up these quotas immediately. Let's say in the past 5 years, we have 50 quotas remaining every day. We're talking about some 40,000 quotas immediately available at hand. So be it women, adults, children waiting in line, we can allow them to come to Hong Kong immediately with the unused quota, rather than having them to wait for 3 or 4 years in the queue, so as to increase manpower supply. Another suggestion, childcare. Perhaps the government should, say, run a competition or deploy technology so that online matching can be done or training can be provided. Now, for women, I think they prefer to work from 9 to 3. If we have a dedicated unit or department to help women get a job between 9 and 3, then that would be ideal. Now, like Mr. Casper Choi said, for the hospitality industry, they do need a lot of manpower exactly between 9 and 3. The other point is this. For the better off families, is there an incentive for women to remain in the workforce after giving birth to a child? For example, in the first 2 years after delivery, tax breaks should be provided so as to retain these women in the workforce. Next point, we should encourage the disabled to take up jobs as well. It leaves more to be decided at the moment. Take another country as an example, especially for outsourced contracts of the government. A quota can be set up for the disabled. Another point, many women have complained about being married to a husband in Hong Kong and not being able to work because they are on a two-way permit. But if the lady is from elsewhere, from Taiwan, from one of the Asian countries, they can work on the strength of a visa. So we should allow those two-way permit holders to work as well. Now, rather than importing labor in general, the government should introduce a tax for importing labor for people to have to think carefully whether they should opt for imported labor or training local talents. Next, Mr. Kenneth Lam. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. First of all, I thank the Financial Secretary for showing care to our young people. In last year's budget, he mentions that there is imbalance in our economic development and many young people are not able to excel. And there is a dedicated chapter to youth development, and the government will be implementing the youth development blueprint with a number of measures to support youth development. This shows the sincerity and commitment on the part of the government. There are over 100 new measures under the blueprint, requiring collaboration between different policy bureaus, departments, as well as NGOs. Dedicated funding should be provided to support the implementation of these initiatives in the blueprint. Mr. Deputy, the budget this year is titled Leaping Forward Steadily, Together We Bolster Prosperity Under One New Vision. I think the Financial Secretary has delivered, such as developing digital economy, Web3, and green finance. These are the emerging global trends that are also dovetailed with the national strategies. We also have measures to support other national strategies, such as the 14th Five-Year Plan, so on and so forth, that gives unique advantage, that the leverage on Hong Kong's unique advantages. Now we have prepared the stage for our young people to excel on this global stage. But more importantly, there is a question mark on whether we can help them equip the necessary skills and knowledge to become masters of the next generation. On Greater Bay Area development, the aviation industry, so on and so forth, there are training initiatives. However, the budget seems to be silent on helping our youths get the correct understanding of the country's development since young. And that means we should help build a good foundation when they are in primary and secondary schools. Mr. Deputy, young people should be taught about our country since they are young, so that when they consider their future, they will consider taking forward development in the country. School sponsoring bodies and NGOs have organized mainland exchange tours. These tours, however, must be innovative and flexible to cater for the needs of young people. Now, there is an international youth exchange program organized by the HYAB. Application is received only once a year, and the organization is required to come up with a plan in advance. There is a lack of flexibility. No additional funding can be allowed. Now, I understand the administration has replied that during the special FC session that they will consider relaxing the requirement. I do hope this can be taken forward. Next point about Hong Kong young people developing their career in the mainland. They are the ambassadors of Hong Kong. They can help tell good stories of Hong Kong to mainlanders. Well, in recent years, more and more young people have furthered their studies and developed their career in the mainland. Now, we should revamp the role of the mainland officers. Instead of taking a passive role, they should be more proactive to provide support for Hong Kong residents there. They should actively organize exchange activities and liaison sessions, and they should be proactive in understanding the situation of Hong Kong enterprises and Hong Kong youths working in the mainland so that more support can be provided to them. For example, a mentorship scheme should be set up for Hong Kong youths who have stayed in the mainland longer to help those new arrivals. We should also attach importance to developing STEAM education at the primary level so that primary students can develop an innovative mindset. STEAM education is now taking a school-based approach. Schools can decide on STEAM curriculum. Some teachers do not receive sufficient training. There is a problem with the quality of STEAM education and consistency. We should provide curriculum guide in a clearer manner, together with indicators relating to class hours and learning outcomes. The government should also join hands with the I&T sector, the business sector, and schools in creating a good ecosystem. Mr. Xia Bolong earlier remarked that young people are the future of not only Hong Kong but also our country. Be it no matter how many ups and downs they go through, they're our future. As the Youth Development Blueprint goes, we should embrace our young people. We should help them. For families with children, we should help lift the burden. The consumption voucher scheme can somewhat alleviate their burden. However, we should encourage young people to stay in Hong Kong, to start a family and then to have children. The government should walk the extra mile. According to the CNSD, last year the unemployment youth rate among youths aged 20 to 29 is 7.2%. That is well above the general unemployment rate. However, young people need guidance, they need career support instead of just talking about innovation technology. So for working youths, more support should be provided to guide them on the right path. This can be done by helping them further their studies after work. The government can provide a boost in this regard. Many members have criticized the lack of policies in this budget to boost the birth rate. It's a personal choice. If there is a lack of support, parents will be frustrated and they'll be deterred to have more children. We do not have sufficient services available. For example, childcare services. In recent years, the utilization rates have stayed at 100%. We need more services to reassure prospective parents. And it is also a great burden on the shoulders of parents to raise a family. For example, as I mentioned, less than 20% of textbook subsidies are provided, and also the same goes for travel subsidy. The government should do more to reassure parents, or else the aging population and the low birth rate situation will deteriorate. Now, as the Financial Secretary said, we have limited resources but unlimited potential of development. I agree with this in principle. However, after dishing out money, we need to make sure people have a sense of bliss, a sense of gain, and a sense of recognition of the government's work. So I submit. I support the second and third reading of the bill.
Mr. Chao Siu-chung. President, over the past 2 years, the government used a lot of public money to fight COVID that led to a drop in our reserves. Despite that, the government took on board some of our suggestions from the Federation of Labor Unions. Consumption vouchers were rolled out. There are also other one-off relief measures. I commend the government for those steps. This is a pragmatic budget that's also forward-looking. In terms of integrating international development, focusing on the economy, and supporting people, the budget proposes a number of plans and initiatives. With the full resumption of normalcy, we're in the post-COVID stage. There are new challenges. Some industries see a temporary manpower crunch. The government is considering importing labor, but then there are no other options. President, importing labor will backfire. This is an option that should be considered with caution. We should unleash a local labor force, it boosts the local labor participation rate. There should be more training. President, the budget proposes that for employees over the age of 65, the employers should get tax breaks for their NPF contributions from 100% to 200%. This will encourage employers to continue to hire senior employees. I support this move. But from what we have observed in the labor sector, many employers simply do not make NPF contributions for employees over the age of 65. For the higher tax deduction, is that enough incentive to change employers' mind for employers who simply choose not to make the contribution? If employers simply don't make that contribution, then this move will do nothing. And it will do nothing to encourage the employment of senior employees. If the government is intending to get senior workers to work, then my proposal is that for those employees aged 65 to 70, the government should make the NPF contributions for the employers. That will help partially meet the manpower crunch. And this will also ensure better protection for senior employees. We're seeing normal life coming back. Some sectors are seeing a labor crunch. Part of the reason is that some workers have temporarily left the labor force. That has led to a shrinking of the labor force, and there's a drop in labor participation rate. This is not about the lack of people. So our priority is for those who have temporarily left the labor force to come back in the long run. The government should coordinate across departments in boosting the labor participation rate, unleash the labor force. We only had a 58.2% in labor participation rate. The rate among women was as low as 48.4%. In Macau, it's 59.7%, and in Singapore, it's 63.4%. We're lower, our rate is lower by 10 percentage points. The government should enhance the child care services, encourage the use of multiple modes of employment, and also offer flexi hours. That's how we can get more women to work and boost the labor participation rate among women. The government should also look at the example of the Research Talent Hub of the Innovation and Technology Commission and also the other schemes. So the point is to give the subsidies to the employees, relax the age threshold, encourage people of different age groups to join the sectors where manpower is needed. For the employees, the government can provide subsidies on top of wages. The budget proposes a 2-year first hire then train scheme. This is for those pursuing a program for construction safety officers. There will be on-job training allowances. I welcome this proposal. I believe this move will help boost manpower and also raise the level of occupational safety and health. I suggest that this move should be extended to other sectors where a manpower crunch is found. President, in recent years, manpower is also tight in the civil service. I put in the written question in 2021 to 2022. We have seen a sharp rise in former civil servants, more than 3,700 people. This is more than double the number from the previous year. This may have to do with the unattractive pay of the civil service. Take the clerical assistant grade in the government. The starting salary is just $14,080. In the private market for similar jobs, the starting pay is higher for those jobs, and there are options. So how many recent graduates would really want to make joining the civil service as their first choice? Now, on the dental benefits for civil servants, no improvement over a long time. Can the government consider ways to retain workers, hire retired workers, or other options? Are these something the government should be considering? Address the manpower issues retraining, training up local talent. These are the ways. With a manpower shortage, and then you turn to importation schemes that will simply be unfair to local workers. Now, for some job functions with particular manpower crunches, then I do support a limited degree of importation. Now I want to turn to unemployment support. During COVID, there was a 100% loan, 100% guarantee for loans, so that workers can meet their urgent needs. That's the 100% personal loan guarantee scheme. The first scheme will expire in April this year, and the another scheme expired in July last year. We're now in the middle of a recovery. We still have more than 110,000 people jobless. There should be continuous support for the jobless and extend the two schemes I just mentioned. The government should not just treat those measures as one-off measures. On unemployment support, Hong Kong is lagging behind. That's why I believe we should extend the two schemes. The government should come up with a more comprehensive unemployment support scheme for those who lead a hand-to-mouth existence. President, we have to overcome the difficulties ahead. There are challenges confronting us. We managed to overcome COVID and get out of it. So we should stay confident that in this post-COVID stage, we can rise to the challenges and overcome them. I hope that the government, while focusing on the economy, can also prioritize local workers when it comes to jobs and improving labor rights. The government should not shirk its responsibilities and deliver better results. President, I so submit. Next, Mr. Eric Yim. Thank you, President. This year's budget comes at a time as we put COVID behind us, economy is recovering, and the impetus in the economy is showing. Budget is about the momentum of our economic recovery, improving people's lives, and aligning into our country's development. A number of measures are proposed. This includes relief measures about COVID and also support for businesses. The budget also responds to some of my suggestions. First, the new capital investment entrance scheme. There are also measures on developing a smart port. I think this is a comprehensive budget. This shows the commitment of the new term of government, and this deserves recognition. But there are also areas where improvement can be made. 3 points from me. First, a greater effort should be made to resolve deep-seated tensions and improve people's lives. First, we need to create land, boost housing supply. A long-standing and deep-seated problem is that homes are out of reach for most people. This has to do with a land shortage and housing supply. There's a proposal about the artificial islands in the central waters. There will be more land sale, rail and property projects, and also building more public housing and transitional housing projects like public housing projects. These measures deserve support. But then the progress falls short of expectations. A greater effort needs to be made, especially on areas like the northern metropolis. So on land and housing, the northern metropolis can provide quicker results. So this is where the government should zero in on. Now, turning to an aging population, I suggest that for Hong Kong taxpayers supporting parents in the mainland, there should be tax breaks for such taxpayers. And with an aging population, people have aging parents and they are faced with a heavier burden. Under one country, two systems we want to integrate into national development, the government has also encouraged seniors to move to other cities in the Greater Bay Area. As we have more mainland talent coming to Hong Kong under various talent admission schemes, then there will be more parents of Hong Kong people in the mainland. Now, these taxpayers support their parents, but they cannot apply for the tax deductions. Now, there are technical issues to be sorted out. We now have the internet and wider use of big data. So my suggestion is the government should actively consider that for those with parents ordinarily living in the mainland and those with parents living in Hong Kong, these taxpayers should be able to apply for tax deductions. And then we should also focus on training for young people. We should give them more opportunities. We should provide more education, training, internship opportunities for young people. They should be encouraged to join the maritime trade and aviation industry. And we should also promote diversified development for young people to promote upward mobility. This is where the government should mobilize all sectors of the community, mobilize the Chinese enterprises in Hong Kong with developed presence in the mainland. For young people who wish to integrate into national development, they should be given opportunities. So my suggestion is that for youth in education, training, and internships, the government should work with Chinese firms, step up the cooperation. For the Greater Bay Youth Employment Scheme, we should step up the scheme, provide more resources. Second, innovation. On multiple fronts, we should create stronger impetus for growth. There are measures on economic development in the budget, but there are areas where we should step up the work. First, developing Hong Kong as an innovation and financial center. And we should be providing land, tax, and investment measures for innovation. First, for the Northern Metropolis, that we should do something about the tendering process, bring in the target firms, and create innovation bases there. Second, step up the support for talent admission schemes. With the right regulatory policies, promote the healthy development of Web3. And we should also provide work on carbon trading and green bond. And we should also consolidate our maritime development. We should have a blueprint instead of just relying on the market. Now, on the container throughput at ports, there's a downward trend in the volume. The government should do a forecast and set targets so that we can roll out timely policies to support the industry and allocate the resources to support logistics accordingly. Now, on the East meets West Center for Cultural Exchange, Hong Kong is a melting pot for Eastern and Western cultures. We need diversified culture and arts development. The mainland has an advantage in this area. We need to provide more resources to bring in high-quality arts and culture resources like performances, exhibitions, to enrich our cultural landscape. We need to step up the promotion of traditional Chinese culture and strengthen people's self-confidence in our own country's culture. Now, on education, on our vocational education, we should learn from the example of Germany and other advanced economies, and also the example of Shanghai. Provide more resources. We should train up people accustomed to a digitalization development, and also further developing the education sector. For famous universities around the world, we should get them to set up branch campuses here. We should get famous scholars to teach here. We should also get mainland and Southeast Asian students to pursue studies here. For the Northern Metropolis, we can have a university town. That's how we can have international talent here and also create this industry of visa students. Now, we should also assess the economy and also our fiscal position, exercise prudence in finance. The economic growth is expected to be 3.5 to 5.5%. The revenue is based on this forecast. That is at 6.4% in government revenue. But let's not forget that there are uncertainties in the global economy. There are geopolitical tensions. Global economy, especially the US and European economies, are slowing down. There is monetary tightening. The financial risks are there. Hong Kong is an open economy. Now, we have support from the recovering mainland economy, but there is substantial downward economic pressure. So the government needs to assess this position on income and profits tax and also land sales, stamp duty. The impact on such sources of revenue should be assessed, and the government should come to a careful assessment. On fiscal reserves, it's only enough for 12 months of government expenditure. That's a historical low. I want to remind the government to exercise prudence in finances, explore new sources of revenue, and cut expenditure on new sources of revenue. Now, as long as it's not too much of an impact on the local housing project, there should be more land auctions to meet the shortage of housing. The government can consider relaxing the housing market measures so that people can buy flats. There should also be ways to boost the revenue from stamp duty. There's a need to assess and enhance the tax base. President Xi Jinping mentioned this. To build a strong country, the long-term prosperity and stability of Hong Kong and Macau are a crucial part of the process. There's a need to integrate Hong Kong and Macau into national development with one country, two systems as the guarantee, and then with the concerted efforts of the government and the community, Hong Kong will see greater prosperity. I so submit, President, I support the Appropriation Bill 2023.
Mr. Robert Lee. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. In general, I support the Appropriation Bill 2023. There are many measures in the budget. I believe that they will boost our economic development and brings benefit to people's livelihood. I thank the government for their support to SMEs. We have a new round of consumption voucher, and there is continuous subsidy for rates. I do believe that they will help the Thai people over a difficult time. I'm happy to see that the government has taken on board a number of our proposals. That includes the new capital entrant scheme, development of a retail bond market, developing the green finance market, training of manpower in investment as well as wealth development. I'm disappointed that the stamp duty has been risen. In order to enhance our competitiveness and to consolidate our position as an international financial center, I have some suggestions to make. Well, enhancement of investment, immigration schemes, development of family offices, virtual assets, stamp duty, stock connect, wealth connect, and listing. Well, after the MPCC and the CPPCC, we understand that we need to pursue an innovative and green development. In the budget, we see a lot of coverage on digital economy, green economy. We have the development of the 8 centers. And there is also strong support for the financial sector. I do believe that they will also help with competing for enterprises and talents. We have the Connect schemes, we have R&B businesses, development of bond, a market risk management scheme, fintech, and financial inclusiveness. Well, in terms of the enhancement of investment entrance scheme, I'm very happy to see that the government is doing its part to promote development. I understand that in terms of the new capital investment entrance scheme, the scope of investment will be expanded and they will include products that is conducive to long-term development of Hong Kong. I support that. I suggest that while we control risk, there should be more product involved. Say, for example, RMB denominated products, OTC derivative products, as well. In terms of family offices supporting services, I support that the family investment holding vehicle tax concession is a good idea, but relying solely on the tax concession is not sufficient to attract more family offices to make their presence in Hong Kong. There will be cross-departmental support to provide a one-stop service for family offices. It will be bundled up with immigration. Say, for example, applications for immigration, listing of companies, schoolings for children. They will be packaged together. People from the sector told me that ancillary transaction, a threshold of 5% should be removed. For those relying on dividends or income from securities, that will be more attractive. For the promotion of development of virtual assets, in the budget, we learn about a task force for virtual asset development. And in terms of regulation of virtual asset service providers, it will come into effect on the 1st of June this year. We need to have proper regulation and protection of investors. We need to enhance investor education. We need to enhance involvement of investors. We need to ensure that virtual asset providers should be compliant and operating on a proper platform. For difficulties investors encounter, say for example, opening a bank account, application for insurance, assistance should be provided. There are areas for improvement, say for example, lowering the stamp duty for stock transfer. I've asked the government to consider that. Since August 2021, when the stamp duty rate was raised, it has brought far-reaching implication to our market. According to Hong Kong EX, in the past 12 months, since the adjustment of the stamp duty compared to the 12-month period before that, we're talking about 131.6 billion, and after the adjustment, $107.1 billion, and a downward adjustment of 22%. Sometimes the government said that maybe it's because of the epidemic or the overall investment sentiment. But if you look at other figures, say for example, derivative market, future there has been an increase of 6% and 23%. In terms of ETF, exchange trading fund is not affected by the stamp duty adjustment. The transaction volume has increased by 61%. So the impact of adjustment of stamp duty means that funds have flowed into ETF or other derivative products. In a written reply from the administration, they said that in 2022 to 23, revenue from stamp duty is $52 billion compared to the previous year, a drop by $13.9 billion. That is because of a drop in transaction volume. Well, after the raise of stamp duty on stock transfer, we have not seen any increase in revenue into the coffer. I suggest that the government reconsider the stamp duty, and this is a way to promote circulation in the capital market, in the securities market. With the downward adjustment, it will increase a revenue. It will also enhance competitiveness in the market. In relation to Wealth Connect, is mentioned in the budget. Currently, 24 banks are participating. They're mainly involved in products with medium and low risk. There was little progress in the past year. I asked the government to step on it and work with mainland regulators so that more non-banking intermediaries can participate. The scope can be expanded. I would also like to talk about promotion of reform of the listing regime. The budget mentioned about application to listing, the average time for companies with a capitalization of $1.25 billion, it will take 137 days. For those with a capitalization of less than $750 million, it will take 203 days. And for GEM, it takes us 172 days. So you see that for smaller and medium-sized companies, it will take longer. We need to make sure that companies of different volumes of capitalization and different sizes should be allowed to play into their potential, so that smaller companies will one day become big companies. And there should be streamlining of procedure, and that should be enhancement of certainty. We need to have some kind of reform. I speak to support the Appropriation Bill 2023. Mr. David Lam. Thank you. The healthcare sector is happy to see an increase of 37.1% in tobacco duty. With that adjustment, the proportion of duty of price has increased from 61% to 68%, but the current proportion is still lower than the recommended rate of 75% of the WHO. With an unchanged tobacco duty since 2014, the percentage has dropped from 75% to 61%. Even with an increase of 68%, it was still lower than the rate in 2014. It's our duty to protect public health. We need to maintain the percentage of tobacco duty in tobacco products. I hope that this is only a starting point. We need to maintain the percentage of tobacco duty at 75% of price. Next, I turn to development of primary care. This government is determined to do that, and we in general support the idea. Measures should be pragmatic. It should meet the needs of the general public and the capacity of the healthcare sector. The healthcare sector's voices should be listened to. And the government should understand their concern. Well, when it comes to primary healthcare, it's preventative and prevention of conditions from worsening. What I would like to see is that through public education and subsidy, the public should be encouraged to go for screening for chronic illnesses. And this should be done by gender, family history, age group, and habit. There should be health check put in place for different stages of life. We do need to put more funding into research. We also need to build a data bank on health. For universal health screening to work, you need to provide incentive for grassroots. Say, for example, professional drivers, free checkup or good or subsidies will be good for obesity, rates, BMI, blood sugar, cholesterol. Well, it should be done once every 2 years when you're in your 40s, and it should be capped to within $500. This will greatly prevent complications and chronic illnesses such as heart disease. This will save on healthcare. It will also preserve our labor force. For the first 10-year hospital development plan, it will be completed in 2016. There will be another 5,000 beds and 90 operating theaters. The second plan will start soon. But when it comes to development in other parts of the world, They are focusing on the community service and ambulatory service, say, for example, endoscopies and surgeries, cancer treatment, radiology, and related services. We can have a large-scale ambulatory center so that we can build experience and make good use of manpower. This is a good idea. The government and the hospital authorities should actively consider that. Now I turn to cooperation between Chinese and Western medicine. This is the trend, and it is needed. In order to make it effective, we need to base it on science and empirical evidence. Research results should be turned into protocols and guidelines so that Chinese medicine doctors and Western doctors can make referrals to one another, and everything is evidence-based. I expect that through the Chinese Medicine Development Fund and researches done by universities, there should be protocols, clinical guidelines for cooperation of Chinese and Western medicine. For healthcare financing, this is a great challenge. Public-private partnership, strategic procurement, they should all continue. We're starting from 2019 for the voluntary health insurance scheme. It's been 4 years. Next year, there should be a review. For the VHIS, the voluntary insurance health scheme, there should be a 50% protection of the fees to be paid for a major illness. But there is a huge discrepancy. A lot of people think that even with the healthcare insurance is of no use. So in the end, they will go back to the public healthcare system. With the second 10-year hospital development plan, we look forward to seeing another 9,300 beds. There should be more room for development of semi-private beds in spacious hospitals. We can encourage those with VHIS who don't want to go fully private. And I'm sure that this will reduce the rate of increase of public healthcare expenditure. This will also make our public healthcare system more sustainable. With the development of community service, the government should actively consider focusing on families as well. We're now at the crossroad of future development. No matter what we do, it will have an implication of our future development. I'm happy to see that this term of government is determined to take up healthcare reform, and I thank the efforts for allocating resources. We'll work together to overcome difficulties. I speak in support of the Appropriation Bill 2023.
議員。
主席，
Ms. Judy Chan, Mr. Deputy, I speak in support of the Appropriation Bill 2023. In recent years, in light of the global political landscape and COVID-19 pandemic, people in Hong Kong have been facing a lot of challenges. However, there are always solutions to problems. This budget emphasizes development as the cornerstone of stability. The title of the budget is Leaping Forward Steadily, Together We Bolster Prosperity Under One New Vision. Hong Kong has entered a new phase of prosperity after restoring order from chaos. The economy is picking up, and we are fully confident in the future of Hong Kong. I thank the Financial Secretary for taking on board many of the suggestions put forward by the New People's Party. At the same time, the Financial Secretary has done a lot in trying to incorporate the views in this council so as to resolve deep-seated problems so that the public can see for themselves a healthy relationship between the executive and the administration. Mr. Deputy, we need to adopt a people-centric development approach. That means we need to heed people's views and understand their needs. I understand from this budget that the Financial Secretary has done a lot to show care to the people, such as the consumption voucher scheme. It is one of the relief measures. It is also part of Happy Hong Kong campaign that can help put a smile on everyone's face. $100 million have been set aside for the purpose of women's development under the Women Empowerment Fund, so that training can be provided to women to enhance their caring skills for the elderly and for children, for them to rejoin the workforce and also improve family relationships. However, in this budget, well, there is only one relief measure that supports the families in terms of a $10,000 tax allowance for children. Little support has been provided for women otherwise. The New People's Party is of the view that the amount should be increased and a progressive system should be introduced to provide more tax breaks for people with more children so as to reverse the trend of the declining birth rate and address the demographic challenges facing Hong Kong so that we can groom local talent. We have a big sandwich or middle class in Hong Kong. Families pay a lot to their foreign domestic helpers. However, this budget is silent on any tax break on hiring foreign domestic helpers. I am quite disappointed. The New People's Party will continue to voice out the people's demand. And now the New People's Party strive for a better future for Hong Kong, and in order to achieve that, we need to have a plan that is in touch with reality and the people. A few days ago, the chief executive led a delegation of government officials and LegCo members to the Greater Bay Area. We witnessed for ourselves a number of successful projects. The common theme is that these projects are successful because of meticulous planning. Resources are optimally used, and I have quite an impression on a number of projects, such as the wetland park. In terms of the scale of development, it is achieved only through a very detailed planning process. Through a top-down approach, the zone has been converted from a very unfavorable, heavily polluted site to a strategic ecological site at the provincial level. Through a decade's work, the local economy has revived as a result of this initiative. And this is what is meant by lucid waters and lush mountains are invaluable assets. There is also another project called the Jianyuzhou Cultural and Creative Park. They have brought vibrancy to an old industrial area so that it has now become a creative and cultural park that brings in a new experience for all. Well, these are examples that we can turn to when we ponder our own development. The 14th five-year plan provides strong support for Hong Kong to establish the 8 centers. And in order to develop Hong Kong into these 8 centers, we need to have very good planning. Now, recently, I heard about the chief executive commenting on invigorating Island South. I understand that the government also attaches importance to the initiative, but it is also public aspiration that progress should be made as quickly as possible. The Southern District enjoys a lot of advantages in terms of promoting the creative industries and other areas. However, there are also shortcomings. Say for electric charges, only 240 charges are available in the district for EVs. That is the fewest among all the districts. And how can we promote the development of green transport in such a state? This is because of inadequate planning. Another example is a cyber port. After so many years, this place is still not accessible. It is a waste of our invaluable resources. It is getting in the way of development. In terms of resource allocation, the government should put in more thought. The government must show resolve, and it should be felt by the people. More should be done so that we can truly invigorate Island South and win the public support. I support the Appropriation Bill. After Mr. Frankie Yik and Dr. Teck Chi Yuen have spoken, I will suspend the meeting for today. Mr. Frankie Yik. All the anti-epidemic measures have been lifted, and we are on the path to recovery, return to normalcy. The economic situation worldwide otherwise is pessimistic. According to the IMF projection, the economic growth will drop from 3.4% in 2022 to 2.8% in 2023. The exports of goods and services are still in the doldrums. There are a lot of uncertainties. We're grateful for the government for introducing some relief measures, such as a waiver of fees until the end of the year. Although the extent of waiver is not 75%, but 50%, it is still somewhat a relief for the industries. However, in the past 3 years, some enterprises have eaten into their own savings, and it's time for them to recuperate. The government should do more to alleviate the burden on SMEs. The Liberal Party has time and again urged the government to set up a fund to provide subsidies to cross-boundary services in terms of the trade revival. However, the government has only come up with a 100% loan guarantee scheme. For the cross-boundary trade, in the past 3 years, because of suspension of services, they could only rely on loans. And many SMEs are worried that the banks won't approve their loans. Now, for the 100 loan guarantee scheme, there is no risk on the part of banks in approving loans. So the government should urge banks to approve loans in a more relaxed manner to tide the SMEs over the difficulties. The guarantee scheme is only good for 6 months. Now, but whether operators can apply the loan in time will depend on the pace of recovery of the trade. Although all BCPs are now fully open in operation, many coaches are still idling in the so-called coach cemeteries. Well, it takes time and manpower to repair and maintain these vehicles. There is also difficulty in recruiting sufficient hands. In the short term, these problems cannot be tackled in time. The government should therefore extend this scheme. The Liberal Party also welcomes other initiatives such as waiver of fees for airliners and other measures to promote more routes to be operated. This can help the industry in picking up its pace of recovery. However, Recently, the airport authority has done the rent in arrears of the tenants. But at the moment, there is a manpower crunch. Many airliners are required to put in a lot of resources in recruitment and improving the remuneration of their staff. Any rent hike will hamper the pace of recovery of the aviation industry. I hope the airport authority will scrap the decision of a rental hike. On the contrary, drawing on the STT arrangements, there should be a 50% rent concession for the aviation industry to have some breathing space. With relaxation measures being relaxed in the first 2 months of this year, the capacity of the industry has increased, and the airport authority will be distributing some 650,000 free tickets, and this will further give a boost to the industry. But according to the industry's estimates, they are still short of 20,000 hands. The Greater Bay Area internship scheme for the aviation industry will have 450 quotas instead of 300, but this is far from meeting the manpower needs of the industry. Together with the commissioning of the third runway system next year, some 70,000 additional manpower will be needed. The government should adopt a more open mentality in importing labor to meet the manpower needs. We have a manpower squeeze in the community, be it the aviation industry, transport trade, together with ship repair trade, etc. There's a prevailing shortage. $200 million have been injected to the Maritime and Aviation Training Fund. And meanwhile, the government should also adjust the subsidy level, such as increasing the subsidy amount and extend the coverage of the subsidies. The VTC will also implement a 2-year pilot for secondary students to take the vocational path at an early stage. I believe this can help alleviate manpower shortage. But in the short term, the only option seems to be importing labor. The 14th Five-Year Plan provides express support for Hong Kong to develop into an international aviation hub, and some $20 million have been set aside by the government to conduct a strategic research. The Liberal Party supports that. The Transport and Logistics Bureau will be working with stakeholders and sector representatives in drawing up an action plan by the end of 2023 so as to develop high value-added aviation services, so on and so forth. We need to catch up. So I hope this plan can become ready soon. We also need support in the form of land. Otherwise, any idea will not be translated into action. Now, the transport and logistics sector is one of the major economic pillars in Hong Kong, but all along we have been short of land for logistics development. The government advocates smart logistics, but that means major capital investments by logistics companies. They need to procure equipment, but we still need land to support their operations. In the past, the government has been providing sites in short-term tenancies to support their operations. Some operators use brownfield sites, even Chotong sites. That accounts for the scattering of that accounts for the port and backup sites scattered across the new territories. This is not conducive to high-quality development. Under the lowest bidder wins principle, the short-term tenancy sites are put up for tender every now and then. This can help generate revenue for the public coffers. But the problem is rental goes up, and this hampers the competitiveness of the trade as costs escalate. The government should review the policy. The government should formulate a long-term policy on the use of land to support the logistics development of logistics development. For example, a logistics park should be set up to help support the industry. On new energy transport, following the policy address in the budget, it is said that some 700 electric buses and 3,000 electric taxis will be introduced by 2027, and $200 million have also been set aside to conduct trials on electric commercial vehicles and buses. There is also a 100% guarantee scheme to encourage taxi owners to switch to e-taxis. Apart from financial support, the government should also show more commitment. Now, in Shenzhen, all public transport vehicles are running on electricity, and the same goes for Foshan, and that is because of the policy support given by their governments. I support the bill.
Dr. Teck Ji-yun. President, a key role for electrical members is to monitor the government's performance, represent public opinion, and make sure people govern for the people. If government policies fall short of society's needs, electrical members should voice their opposition. When it comes to voting, the electrical members should vote against a proposal that has such a problem. On February 23rd, I said this to the Financial Secretary. The social welfare sector opposes this 1% reduction in recurrent expenditure for the social welfare sector. If the government does not take back the reduction, I will not support this budget. The Financial Secretary told me this then. The government would not be coerced. Financial Secretary, electrical members vote against you and you take that as coercion. Isn't that overreaction? I need to stress this. Electrical members represent people's opinion, and if government policies go against popular opinion, it's only natural that we voice our opposition. All along, the social welfare sector has opposed reductions in spending for social welfare. In 2000 and 2006, the government cut welfare spending by 6.5%. Last year, a cutback by 1%. That means altogether, in terms of recurrent spending on welfare organizations, that's over $70 billion in cutbacks, or 7.5%. This means the organizations cannot offer a reasonable pay and falls short of the pay offered by the Social Welfare Department. In the past, the same pay would apply for the same grade. Given the reduction in spending, the organizations have to lay off people. That hurts morale, and that adds to tensions between the organizations and the workers. In 2000, the social welfare organizations accepted the lump sum grant system because they were hoping for reasonable and flexible deployment of resources, and this turned out to be the start of a nightmare. The organizations entered into the lump sum grant agreement with the government. The agreement sets out how the grant would be arrived at and what sorts of performance pledges there would be. Then the government went on to cut the resources, and the organizations had to perform the same resources. This is a unilateral breach of the agreement by the government. The government is not being fair to the social welfare organizations. That's why we oppose the reduction. Since last year, the government started cutting back the spending by 1%. That's $200 million. $2 million is just peanuts for the government. But for the social welfare organizations, that's adding insult to injury and piling on the misery. $200 million means 500 social worker posts. This year, this day and age, there's keen demand for social workers. You cut back the resources by 500 social workers. Isn't that worsening the problem? During the fifth wave of COVID outbreak, we had this painful experience at care homes for the elderly and persons with disabilities. Social workers are working under difficult situations, protecting seniors and those with disabilities. Many surveys show people in Hong Kong are under huge stress, they're under emotional stress, and there's keen demand on counseling and family support. President, these are difficult times, and the government wants to cut spending on welfare. How can I support this budget? The Financial Secretary said, Cutting back the resources is something every department has to do, and we have to ride out the tough times together, and this is only fair. President, let me say this. Cutting back on social welfare spending, education, welfare, this is not a reasonable allocation of resources. This is not being fair to those in the grassroots. Take our tax system. We don't apply across-the-board cuts. Those who can afford it will shoulder more of the cuts. That's reasonable allocation of resources. So cutting back on welfare spending is not a reasonable approach. The 1% cut for all departments does not affect schools and frontline services at hospitals. So why aren't care homes exempted? Is this fair to the vulnerable? The financial secretary said multiple times many resources went to social welfare. But I want to say this. More social welfare resources are there to meet the unmet needs. This is simply for making up for lost time, such as building elderly care homes. This is not to make up for the past cut, and this does nothing to address the problems, the difficulties for the welfare sector. We're talking about two separate issues, and you should not mix them up together. Increasing resources is simply making up for lost time. And then we have a separate issue. The Hong Kong Council of Social Service wrote to the Social Welfare Department expressing opposition to the cutback and asked the SWD to honor the pledge to the social welfare bodies. President, the social welfare sector opposes the cutback. Can I support this budget? The budget says this. Some money is set aside to tie in with the community's development. $100 million to women's development, $1 billion for revitalizing historic buildings through partnership scheme. There's also $10 billion for various measures on university campuses. But then in the same budget, no money is set aside for poverty relief. Zero allocation. Nothing on targeted poverty relief at all. And this does nothing to respond to the cause in the policy address on poverty relief. I also put in a written question on targeted measure, specific plans, etc. On April 17th, the Special Finance Committee meeting, I pressed the Secretary for Labor and Welfare on the specific strategies, measures, programs, and estimate for poverty alleviation. The Secretary said this, Strive and Rise program. That's all. And also reorganizing the Commission on Poverty. President, these are not new measures. I fail to see how determined the government is when it comes to poverty alleviation. No target, no programs, no estimate. That's 3 new. So targeted poverty relief is simply more meetings, more talk, listening to views, or window dressing. So for the secretaries of departments and directors of bureaus, with what you're doing, talk to the underprivileged families. Try to convince them that the government is working hard on poverty alleviation. Tell them that this will help improve their living conditions. So that's poverty alleviation's KPIs. President, the government is being 3-0 with poverty relief. Can I support this budget? The government continues to cut back on welfare spending, fails to listen to the sector's opinions, and leaves much to be desired on social welfare. I cannot support this budget. President, I also request that at the 3rd reading, I would claim a division at the voting. Thank you, President. The meeting is adjourned. We will resume at 9 a.m. tomorrow.